The crystal champagne flute felt like a shard of ice in my 68-year-old hand. Across the polished mahogany of the restaurant's finest private dining table, my new daughter-in-law, Amelia, offered me a smile that didn't quite reach her perfectly made-up eyes. "With all due respect, Margaret," she said, her voice smooth as silk, "now that the wedding is over, maybe it's time we discussed a more permanent living situation for you. We were looking into some lovely state-funded homes. We just don't have the resources to support you, and we need to think about our future." My son, my dear Leo, shifted uncomfortably in his seat, a puppet caught in strings he couldn't see. Amelia placed a perfectly manicured hand on his arm, a gesture of feigned support. Little did either of them know, as they planned to ship me off to a life of charity, that I could buy this entire five-star restaurant, its staff, and the city block it sat on, without even making a dent in the $7 million my late husband had left me. And in that moment, as I looked at her greedy, pitying face, I sent a silent prayer of thanks to my beloved David for the secret I was keeping. Thank God I never told them about the money. Hi everyone, I'm Grandma Margaret. I'm 68 years old, and I live in a quiet, unassuming little house in the heart of Napa Valley. To anyone who passes by, I'm just another widow, living out her golden years on a modest pension. My neighbors see me tending my roses. My son sees a mother who needs to be managed, and his new wife, well, she sees a burden, a stepping stone to be cleared away. But they don't see the truth. No one does. And that's because my husband, David, made me promise. This story, you see, is built on a secret. A $7 million secret. Dying. When David was dying, he didn't just leave me with a lifetime of beautiful memories. He left me with a fortune we had quietly, diligently built over 40 years of marriage. He was a brilliant man, a quiet genius in the stock market who saw trends before anyone else. But he was also the humblest person I ever knew. We lived simply, not because we had to, but because we wanted to. We found our joy in each other, not in things. In his final days, his mind was as sharp as ever. He held my hand, his grip weaker than it used to be, but still full of love, and he made me swear an oath. "Meg," he whispered, his voice raspy, "the money is for you. For your security, for your peace. But don't tell Leo. Not yet." One. I remember my confusion. But why, my love? He's our son. He has a right to know. David shook his head slowly on the pillow. "A man's character isn't tested when he has nothing," he said, his words now etched forever onto my soul. "It's tested when he thinks there's something to be gained. I want our son to be a good man, not just a man waiting for a handout. And I want you to be protected. Money, it makes people strange, Meg. It brings out a hunger you never knew they had. Keep it secret. Let it be your shield, not a target on your back. Wait. Whoa. Watch. You'll know when the time is right, or when the time is wrong." Carrying that secret after he passed was the loneliest burden of my life. Every time I paid for groceries with my small pension budget, every time I patched an old sweater instead of buying a new one, every time Leo would visit and worry about my finances, the secret felt like a hot coal in my throat. I was living a lie, but it was a lie forged from love and a solemn promise to the man who was my everything. I was playing the part of a poor, aging widow, all while sitting on a treasure chest. And I hated it. Until now. Until this moment, in this fancy restaurant, when the woman who married my son revealed her true nature, and I finally, truly understood my husband's wisdom. This isn't just a story about money. It's a story about the test my husband set up from beyond the grave, and how my daughter-in-law was about to fail it in the most spectacular way imaginable. So please, settle in. This is a story I have held in my heart for a long time. Your support, a simple like or a subscription to Grandmother's Soliloquy, gives me the courage to tell it. This is the story of how a secret inheritance saved me from the viper I had welcomed into my family. My story, this secret life of mine, really begins with David. To understand why I would keep such a fortune hidden, you have to understand the man who made it, and the life we built together. a life that was rich in everything but extravagance. David was the quietest man in any room, but he was also the smartest. He wasn't a Wall Street shark in a fancy suit. He was a high school history teacher who just happened to have an incredible mind for numbers and patterns. Investing was his hobby, his private passion. He'd sit at our small kitchen table in the evenings, after grading papers, with financial reports spread out before him, a cup of tea steaming at his elbow. He never spoke of wins or losses in terms of dollars. To him, it was a game, a puzzle, and he was brilliant at solving it. We never lived like we had money. Our house, the one I still live in, is a testament to that. It's a simple 2-bedroom cottage with a garden that was David's pride and joy. He spent more time tending his heirloom tomatoes and fragrant lavender than he ever did tracking his portfolio. He drove the same simple sedan for 15 years, claiming it was just getting broken in. His favorite sweater had a patch on the elbow that I had sewn there myself. When I'd suggest we splurge on something, a fancy vacation, a new car, he'd just smile and say, "Meg, what for? Everything I could ever want is right here in this garden with you." Our wealth wasn't in a bank. It was in our shared sunsets on the porch, in the scent of the soil after rain, in the comfort of knowing we had each other. His love was my greatest treasure, and I thought that was the only inheritance I would ever need. We raised our son Leo with these same values. He grew up thinking we were just a normal, middle-class family. He never wanted for anything important: love, support, a good education. But he certainly didn't get a sports car for his 16th birthday. He got a second-hand bicycle and a lecture from his father on the value of hard work. He worked a part-time job through high school and college. David wanted him to understand that self-worth comes from what you build, not what you're given. And it worked. Leo grew into a kind, earnest, and compassionate young man. He became an architect, passionate about designing affordable, sustainable housing. He was a good son, and I was so proud of him. Perhaps, in hindsight, our simple life made him a little too naive. He was raised to see the good in people, and he never learned to look for the hidden agenda, the subtle signs of avarice his father saw so clearly. And then, 2 years ago, Leo brought Amelia home. The moment she walked through my door, I understood why my son was so smitten. She was dazzling. Not just beautiful, with her bright eyes and radiant smile, but intelligent and charming. She worked in art curation, a world that sounded so sophisticated. She gushed about our charming and authentic little house. She admired my simple, handmade quilts and praised my cooking as if she'd never tasted anything so good. She listened to my stories about David with rapt attention, her expression a perfect mask of sympathy and admiration. She said all the right things, hit all the right notes. She looked at Leo with such adoration. I thought my son had truly found his soulmate. I wanted to love her. For Leo's sake, I truly did. But even in those early days, there were tiny moments, little discordant notes in her perfect symphony that pricked at the back of my mind. I tried to ignore them, telling myself I was just a protective mother, looking for faults that weren't there. The first time was subtle. Amelia was flipping through a glossy magazine she'd brought with her, and she paused on an advertisement for a diamond necklace, a piece so extravagant it probably cost more than our car. She sighed, a tiny, almost inaudible sound. When she noticed I was looking, she laughed it off. "Can you imagine anyone actually buying something so ridiculously expensive?" she said, shaking her head. But for a split second, I hadn't seen ridicule in her eyes. I had seen a deep, raw, almost painful longing. It was a hunger so intense, it startled me. Another time, we were having coffee on the porch, and she was talking about her friends. "Brenda just got married," she said, her voice light. "Her parents bought them a condo in the city as a wedding gift." A condo! Can you believe the pressure some parents put on their kids? On the surface, it was a criticism of materialism. But underneath, I heard something else. A note of envy. A quiet testing of the waters. She would often ask questions about Leo's childhood, which seemed sweet, but they always veered towards questions about family heirlooms or the old farmhouse his grandparents used to own. She was mapping out our family's financial landscape, searching for treasure on a map that I knew was blank, all while the real treasure was buried in a place she would never think to look. Each time one of these moments happened, I would feel a little chill, a flicker of doubt. But then Leah would look at her with such complete and utter love, and she would turn her dazzling smile on him, and I would push my feelings down. I would tell myself I was being cynical and unfair. David had been gone for a year, and my grief, I reasoned, was making me suspicious. I was lonely, and maybe I was just jealous of the woman who now held my son's heart. So I ignored my instincts. I smiled at her engagement party, helped her plan the wedding, and stood proudly in the front row as she promised to love and cherish my son. I welcomed her into my family, ignoring the faint, cold whisper of my husband's voice in the back of my mind. Money makes people strange, Meg. It brings out a hunger you never knew they had. I had no idea how soon and how brutally I was about to learn the truth of those words. The wedding planning was where Amelia's quiet, subtle campaign of reconnaissance shifted into a full-blown psychological assault. It was a masterclass in manipulation, so skillfully executed that it left me constantly questioning my own sanity. On the surface, she was the perfect, considerate future daughter-in-law, always asking for my opinion. Margaret, what do you think of this venue? Is it too much? I want it to be a day we can all be proud of. But her questions were traps, designed to make me feel small, old-fashioned, and most of all, poor. She would present me with two options, always framing them in a way that highlighted my perceived financial limitations. So, we could have the reception at the community hall, which is, very practical, she would say, her voice laced with a faint, almost imperceptible note of pity. Or, there's the vineyard at Silver Creek. It's Leah's dream venue, but goodness, the price is just astronomical. We could never afford it on our own, of course. She would then look at me with wide, hopeful eyes, a silent invitation for me to offer up my non-existent savings. When I would gently suggest the community hall was a lovely, sensible choice, she would sigh dramatically. You're right, of course. We have to be realistic. She would then turn to Leo, who would have been listening with a furrowed brow, and say, Your mother is so wise. She's always thinking about what's practical for us. She made me the villain of her story, the sensible, budget-conscious matriarch who was holding them back from the wedding of their dreams. Leo, my dear, sweet, oblivious son, saw only a fiancée who was trying to be inclusive and a mother who was being prudent. He couldn't see the game. He couldn't see that every practical choice I endorsed was another piece of evidence she was collecting to prove that I was a financial burden, a drain on their future. The battle over the wedding dress was a particularly brutal skirmish. Amelia had found a dress online, a confection of French lace and hand-sewn pearls, with a price tag that was more than my annual pension. She showed it to me, her face a perfect picture of wistful longing. Isn't it a dream? She breathed. It's silly, I know. It's just so far beyond our means. For weeks, she would leave the webpage open on her laptop whenever I was around. She would talk about how her friend Brenda's mother had paid for her dress. The pressure was immense, a silent, suffocating weight. I finally suggested we go to a lovely local bridal shop that had beautiful, affordable dresses. The day we went shopping was a nightmare. Amelia walked through the racks of beautiful gowns with a look of profound disappointment. She would hold up a perfectly lovely dress and say things like, "Oh, this is nice. The fabric isn't quite the same, is it? But it's a very sensible option." She spoke in a stage whisper to the sales assistant, loud enough for me to hear. We're on a very strict budget. My mother-in-law is helping, but her resources are limited. I felt my face burn with a humiliation so deep it was almost dizzying. I was being painted as a miser, a poor old woman whose poverty was ruining the most important day of her son's life. In the end, she settled for a dress, her face a mask of tragic resignation. She made sure Leo knew what a sacrifice she was making, for his sake and for mine. My inner world became a constant tug of war. One part of me, the mother who loved her son, felt a crushing guilt. Was I being selfish? Was I letting my promise to David stand in the way of my son's happiness? Maybe I should just reveal a small part of the money, enough to give them the wedding she so clearly craved. But then my husband's voice, his wise, cautious words, would echo in my mind. A man's character isn't tested when he has nothing. It's tested when he thinks there's something to be gained. This wasn't about Leo. This was about her. And this test wasn't about a wedding. It was about the rest of my life. So I held firm, my heart aching with the effort. I played my part. I gave them a modest check towards the wedding, an amount that was appropriate for a retired widow. Amelia accepted it with a smile that was both grateful and condescending. "Thank you, Margaret," she said, her tone suggesting I had just handed over my last pennies. "Every little bit helps." After the wedding, her campaign escalated. The polite suggestions about my future became more direct, more insistent. My little house, which she had once called charming, was now suddenly a bit isolated for a woman of your age. My insistence on living independently was no longer spirited but stubborn. She began leaving brochures for assisted living facilities on my kitchen table. They were always for the state-funded ones, the grim, institutional-looking places that smelled of disinfectant and despair. The dialogues between us were a chess match where I was always on the defensive. "Margaret, I was just reading about this wonderful community, Golden Years Villa," she'd say, her voice bright and cheerful. "They have organized activities and on-site nursing. You wouldn't have to worry about a thing." "That's very thoughtful, Amelia, but I'm perfectly happy right here. My garden keeps me busy." "But what if you fell? Who would know? Leo and we worry so much. We just want you to be safe." She used my son's love for me as a weapon against me. She would frame her attempts to get rid of me as deep concern for my well-being. Leo, caught in the middle, was torn. He loved me, but he was also a newlywed, eager to please his beautiful, persuasive wife. He saw her as caring and responsible, and me as perhaps a little irrational, clinging to a past I could no longer manage. "Mom," he'd say to me in private, his face etched with worry, "Amelia is just concerned. Maybe we should just look at one of the places, just to see?" "Leo, darling," I'd reply, my voice calm, betraying none of the fury raging inside me. "This is my home. Your father and I built it. Every rose in that garden has a memory. I'm not leaving." The final straw wasn't a brochure or a manipulative conversation. It was an act of such breathtaking arrogance that it finally shattered any remaining hope I had that I was wrong about her. I had an old armchair in my living room. It was David's chair. It was faded, the fabric worn thin on the arms, and it had a slight permanent indentation from the countless hours he had spent sitting there, reading. It was arguably the ugliest piece of furniture in my house, but to me, it was the most precious. It was a sacred object. I came home one afternoon from the grocery store to find Leo and Amelia in my living room, and the chair was gone. In its place stood a sleek, modern, and utterly soulless-looking recliner. Amelia was beaming. "Surprise!" she announced, clapping her hands together. "We got you a new chair. I know how much your old one meant to you, but it was so worn out, and frankly, a bit of an eyesore. This one has lumbar support and everything. We used the gift money from our wedding. We wanted to do something nice for you." I stared at the empty space where David's chair used to be. My heart felt like it had been ripped out of my chest. I couldn't breathe. All the air had been sucked out of the room. I looked at Amelia's triumphant, smiling face, and I finally saw her for what she was. This wasn't a gift. This was a conquest. She hadn't just removed a piece of furniture. She had removed a piece of my history. She had erased my husband. She was systematically dismantling my life, my memories, my very identity, to make room for the future she had planned. A future that did not include me or my past. "Where is it?" I asked, my voice a strangled whisper. Amelia's smile faltered for a second. "Where is what, dear?" "The chair," I said, my voice gaining strength, fueled by a rage so cold and pure it burned. "My husband's chair. Where is it?" Leo looked uncomfortable. "Mom, it's okay." Amelia took it to the dump. It was falling apart. The dump. She had taken a piece of my soul and thrown it in the garbage. I looked from my son's confused face to Amelia's, which was now a mask of offended innocence. "I was just trying to do something nice," she said, her voice quivering as if she were the one who had been wrong. "I can't seem to do anything right." That was it. The awakening was complete. My husband's words came back to me, no longer a whisper, but a roar. "Wait. Watch. Dyke, Barney. You'll know when the time is right, or when the time is wrong." The time was wrong. Terribly, horribly wrong. This woman wasn't just greedy. She was cruel. She was a vandal of the heart. And she had made the gravest miscalculation of her life. She thought she was dealing with a poor, helpless old widow she could easily discard. She had no idea she had just declared war on a queen who was sitting on a fortress of $7 million. And I, in that moment, decided it was time to lower the drawbridge and show her the full power of the kingdom she had tried to destroy. I stood in the center of my violated living room, the ghost of my husband's presence replaced by the sterile chemical smell of a new piece of furniture I didn't want. The rage that had risen in me was not a hot, screaming thing. It was a glacier, cold, immense, and moving with an unstoppable, crushing force. I looked at the spot where David's chair had been, the place he had read stories to a young Leo, the place he had held my hand on long, quiet evenings, a place Amelia had called an eyesore and sent to the dump. Leo stood there, wringing his hands, a pained and confused expression on his face. "Mom, please don't be upset. We were just trying to help." But it was Amelia's performance that was truly breathtaking. Her eyes filled with tears, her voice quivering with a perfectly pitched imitation of hurt. "I can't seem to do anything right," she sobbed, burying her face in Leo's shoulder. "I just wanted you to have something nice, to feel comfortable." I let the silence hang in the air for a long moment, letting them stew in it. Then I raised my eyes and looked directly at Amelia, past her crocodile tears, past the mask, and into the cold, calculating heart of her. My voice, when it came out, was unnervingly calm. "No, Amelia," I said, each word precise and clear. "You can't." I then turned my gaze to my son. "Leo, I would like you to take your wife home now. I need to be alone." My quiet dismissal was more effective than any shout could have been. It was an order, not a request, delivered with an authority they had never heard from me before. Amelia's sobs hitched in her throat, her eyes widening in surprise. Leo, looking relieved to have a clear direction, simply nodded. "Of course, Mom." He guided his still pretending to be devastated wife out the door, and as it clicked shut, the war council in my head convened. I didn't cry. The time for tears was over. I sat down on my sofa, my back straight, and for the first time since he died, I didn't just miss David, I channeled him. I thought about how he would have handled this. He wouldn't have used a cannon to kill a mosquito. He would have built a better trap. A simple, elegant trap that would allow the pest to exterminate itself. My objective was not to punish Amelia with my money. It was to expose her with it. I needed Leo to see her for what she was, to see the truth so clearly and so painfully that he could never unsee it. The plan that formed in my mind was worthy of my husband. It was a 3-act play, and I was the director. A few days later, I called them. My voice on the phone was frail, shaky, the voice of a broken old woman. I asked them to come over for a serious family discussion. They arrived to find me sitting at the kitchen table, a box of tissues beside me, looking smaller and more vulnerable than they had ever seen me. Act 1, the apology. "I want to apologize," I began, my voice trembling. I looked at Amelia. "You were right. I've been stubborn. That old chair, it was just a thing. I'm old, and I hold on to the past too tightly. You were trying to be kind, and I was ungrateful. I see that now." Amelia's face flooded with triumphant relief. She rushed over to hug me. "Oh, Margaret, of course I forgive you. I understand completely." She was practically purring. Act 2, the lure. I let her go and dabbed my eyes with a tissue. That incident, it made me realize I need to be more practical about the future. Everything. I paused, letting the drama build. So, I called David's old financial advisor, just to, get my affairs in order. I saw a flicker in Amelia's eyes, a tiny spark of intense interest. It turns out, I continued, my voice barely a whisper, that David, bless his heart, set up a small trust fund for Leo. It's complicated, tied up in investments. The advisor said it's not a huge amount, but it's something. However, I looked from Leo's surprised face to Amelia's now rapt one. He said the final disbursement is conditional. Conditional? Leo asked. What does that mean? This was the heart of the trap. It means, I said, looking down at my hands as if I were ashamed, that the principal amount can only be fully released to you, Leo, after I pass away. And only if I have been living happily and comfortably in my own home until that time. The lawyer said I have to provide a signed affidavit to the trust every year, a statement saying that I feel respected, safe, and cherished by my family. I took a shaky breath. He also mentioned a morality clause, something about any actions that could be seen as coercive or motivated by greed could void the trust completely. The silence was electric. Leo, my sweet boy, was the first to speak, just as I knew he would be. Mom, oh my God, that doesn't matter. Forget the money. We just want you to be happy. We'll respect whatever you want. But I wasn't looking at Leo. I was watching Amelia. I watched as a universe of calculations unfolded behind her eyes. I saw the cogs turn as she processed the new reality. The prize wasn't a quick win from shipping me off. The prize was now tied directly to my happiness in my own home. I saw the raw, naked greed flicker there, before it was expertly masked by a look of profound, dutiful love. "Oh, Margaret," she cooed, her voice dripping with sincerity. "You must never feel anything but cherished. That is my solemn promise to you. Your happiness is all that matters." The trap was set. Act 3. The performance. The change in Amelia was instantaneous and breathtaking. Overnight, I went from being a burden to a precious Ming Dynasty vase. She began visiting daily. She brought me organic groceries, expensive pastries from a French bakery, and bouquets of flowers so large I didn't have enough vases for them. She would insist on doing my laundry, scrubbing my floors, telling Leo I shouldn't be lifting a finger. She found an old photograph of David's chair, had it professionally framed in ornate silver, and placed it on the mantelpiece. "So we never forget the wonderful man he was," she said, her eyes misty. The hypocrisy was so thick, I could have sliced it with a knife. At first, Leo was thrilled. "It's so wonderful to see you two getting along," he'd say, relief washing over his face. But after a week, then 2, even he started to see the cracks in her performance. Her kindness was frantic, her compliments cloying. She wasn't being a daughter-in-law. She was an actress auditioning for a role, and her performance was becoming more desperate by the day. After a month of this suffocating false affection, I decided it was time for the curtain to fall. I told him the financial advisor needed to have a meeting with all 3 of us to clarify some of the trust's bylaws. We met in a mahogany-paneled conference room in the office of a prestigious law firm I had hired a week prior. I hired the firm's most intimidating-looking partner, a stern man in his 60s named Mr. Abernathy, to play the part of the advisor. He sat us down, a thick file folder on the desk in front of him. Amelia was practically vibrating with anticipation. "Thank you for coming in," Mr. Abernathy began in a deep, serious voice. "We are here to discuss the David Miller Testamentary Trust." He opened the folder. Amelia leaned forward so subtly, it was almost imperceptible. "Now," he said, peering at a document through his spectacles, "I see here that the trust for the beneficiary, Mr. Leo Miller, was established with a principal investment of $25,000. Amelia's smile froze on her face. "I'm sorry," she interrupted, her voice suddenly sharp. "Did you say 25,000? "Yes, that's correct," Mr. Abernathy said without looking up. "However, that point is moot. The primary condition for disbursement was that Mrs. Miller relocate to an assisted living facility of her choice within a year of Mr. Miller's passing. As she chose to remain in her home, that trust became null and void 6 months ago. There is no money left in it. The mask didn't just slip, it shattered. Amelia's face, which had been a picture of loving concern, contorted into a mask of pure fury. Her skin went pale, then blotchy red. "What?" she hissed, turning on me. "You lied. You played us. All of this for nothing? For $25,000? Her voice rose to a shriek. "We've spent weeks, running around after you, pretending to care about your stupid garden and your dead husband's ugly chair." Leo stared at her, his mouth agape, his face a canvas of dawning horror. He was finally seeing her. The real her. But the play wasn't over. I gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod to Mr. Abernathy. He cleared his throat loudly. "That," he said, his voice booming in the suddenly silent room. He closed the folder, then placed his hands on another, much thicker one beside it. "It is, however, a separate issue entirely from the primary estate of the late Mr. David Miller, which was bequeathed solely to his wife, Mrs. Margaret Miller." He opened the new folder. "My firm has been retained by Mrs. Miller to manage her personal assets. As of this morning, her portfolio is valued at approximately $7,342,000. Yes, John." He let the number hang in the air like a guillotine. Dead silence. I didn't look at Amelia. I didn't have to. I watched my son. I watched Leo turn his head slowly, as if in a dream, from Mr. Abernathy's impassive face to my own. I saw a confusion, the shock, and then the sickening, gut-wrenching, final wave of understanding wash over him. He finally understood the test. He finally understood what his father had known. He finally understood who he had married. And in his eyes, I saw the exact moment his heart broke. The trap hadn't just sprung. It had vaporized the world he thought he knew. The silence in the car, on the way back from the lawyer's office, was heavier than a tombstone. I had insisted on riding with them, a final turn of the screw in my little drama. I sat in the back seat, watching my son and his wife in the rearview mirror. Leo's hands were clamped on the steering wheel, his knuckles white, his gaze fixed on the road ahead as if the white lines were the only thing keeping his world from flying apart. Amelia was a statue of ice beside him, her face pale, her jaw clenched so tight I was surprised her teeth didn't crack. The air was thick with the poison of her exposed greed and the deafening sound of my son's broken heart. She finally broke the silence, her voice a low, venomous hiss. "You must be very proud of yourself, Margaret," she spat, not even turning to look at me. "Tricking us, humiliating me. All for what? To protect your precious money?" Before I could answer, Leo spoke, his voice dangerously quiet. "Shut up, Amelia. Just shut up." It was the first time I had ever heard him speak to her with anything but adoration. A wall had come down, and he was finally seeing the viper in his own passenger seat. The rest of the ride was silent. When we pulled up to my house, Leo got out and opened my door. He wouldn't look at me. He couldn't. He was drowning in his own shame. "I'll call you Mom," he mumbled, before getting back in the car and driving away with the woman who had just been revealed as his life's greatest mistake. He came back 3 days later, alone. He looked like he hadn't slept in years. He stood on my doorstep, his shoulders slumped, and when I opened the door, his eyes were filled with a pain so deep it mirrored my own from the day I lost his father. "Mom," he began, his voice cracking. "I am so sorry." I led him inside, and we sat at the kitchen table where his father had once studied stock reports. He cried then, not like a child, but like a man whose entire foundation had been turned to dust. He apologized for not seeing it, for being so blind, for defending her when she had disrespected me and David's memory. He apologized for the chair. "That chair," he said, his voice thick with regret. "It was the last straw for you, wasn't it? And I was so stupid I just let it happen." I let him speak, let him pour out all the shame and the hurt. When he was done, I took his hand. It was a big, strong hand, but it was trembling. "Leo," I said softly, Your father and I raised you to see the good in people. That is not a flaw. You didn't fail. You were just faced with a level of deception you weren't prepared for. Your heart is good. That's all your father ever wanted." I told him everything then. About his father's last wish, about the promise I had made, about the terrible loneliness of keeping the secret. I explained that the trap wasn't designed to hurt him, but to save him from a lifetime of being manipulated by a woman who loved what she thought he had, not who he was. He finally understood. Our relationship was reforged in that moment, not on the naive foundations of the past, but on a new, stronger bedrock of truth and mutual respect. The divorce was swift and quiet. Amelia, realizing she had no legal claim to my money and had lost Leo completely, tried to get a large settlement out of him. But when Leo's lawyer made it clear he would bring my testimony into court, the story of the state-funded homes, the emotional manipulation, she settled for a quick, clean break. She vanished from our lives. The only other time I heard from her was a single, hate-filled letter that arrived a month later, accusing me of ruining her life. I read it, and then I calmly walked over to my fireplace and dropped it into the flames, watching the ash curl up the chimney and disappear into the sky. In the end, David's wisdom gave us our new beginning. The money, no longer a secret, became a tool for good. I didn't buy a mansion or a sports car. That wasn't our way. But I did establish the Eleanor and David Miller Foundation, a charity that provides scholarships for underprivileged history students and funds for community gardens. And I became the primary investor in my son's passion project, a new company that designs beautiful, innovative, and truly affordable housing. Leo found his purpose again, not just in building houses, but in building a life of integrity, the way his father had taught him. I am still in my little cottage, surrounded by my roses. I am still just Grandma Margaret. But now, I am at peace. The inheritance didn't just make me rich in dollars. It made me rich in truth. What did I learn from this whole ordeal? It wasn't just that my husband was a brilliant man, though he certainly was. I learned that your gut instinct, that little whisper in your soul that tells you something is wrong, is almost never lying. I spent a year telling myself I was cynical, jealous, and unfair because I wanted to believe in the perfect picture my son had painted. I almost sacrificed my peace for the sake of a pretty lie. Trust that whisper. It's the guardian of your heart. I also learned that money doesn't change people. It simply reveals who they have been all along. It's a spotlight that illuminates the dark corners of a person's character. For Amelia, it revealed a cavern of greed. For my son, it revealed a heart that was momentarily lost, but ultimately good and true. And this is my advice to all of you watching. In your life, you will meet people who are dazzling, who say all the right things, who present a perfect face to the world. But watch them closely. Watch how they treat people who they think have nothing to offer them. Watch how they talk about money, success, and status when they think you're not paying attention. Character is not shown in the grand gestures. It's revealed in the small, unguarded moments. And please, especially to the women of my generation and yours, never underestimate the power of your own independence, financial or otherwise. My husband's gift wasn't just the money. It was the power it gave me to protect myself, to control my own destiny. It was a shield, just as he said it would be. Your security and your peace of mind are the most precious assets you will ever have. Guard them fiercely. Thank you for being here with me today, for letting me unburden my heart of this incredible story. It means so much to have your quiet company. If this story resonated with you, I would be so grateful if you would give it a like, subscribe to Grandmother's Soliloquy, and perhaps share it with someone who needs to be reminded of their own strength. Always remember to trust your own wisdom. The world is full of beautiful, genuine souls, but a good shepherd always knows how to spot a wolf, even when it's dressed in the finest sheep's clothing. I'll see you in the next story. Love, Grandma Margaret.